The most common drug prescribed for the prevention of hair loss is called Finasteride, otherwise known as Propecia, and it is certainly effective at slowing hair loss in most men. Unfortunately, recent clinical studies have revealed that long-term use of Finasteride can lead to irreversible side effects. And because of that, many men are now looking for an alternative that actually has proven results based on academic research. No, I'm not talking about some random, all-natural botanical serum that you've probably seen on Instagram, because that probably does nothing. What's up, guys? I'm Dr. Adam Watson, and today we're diving into the research behind RU58841, which is a topical anti-androgen that has emerged as an alternative to Finasteride. RU58841 was actually developed almost 40 years ago by a pharmaceutical company in France, and it belongs to a class of compounds called non-steroidal anti-androgens. Because of its low molecular weight, it can easily be absorbed through the skin, which means that topical application on the scalp is the best way to deliver it to your hair follicles. Multiple studies have shown that it can increase hair length and hair density with comparable results to Finasteride. The difference between the two is when it comes to side effects. Finasteride is known to cause a range of bothersome side effects, including sexual dysfunction. Even worse, clinical research has revealed that sexual dysfunction caused by Finasteride is permanent in some men. And I'll drop a link below so you can read the study for yourself. In fact, there is an increase in a troubling phenomenon called post-Finasteride syndrome that affects young men in particular. So why risk it? Part of the problem with Finasteride, even in topical form rather than pill form, is that it has an exceedingly long half-life, which causes persistent systemic effects throughout your body for a long time. In contrast, RU58841 has a much shorter half-life in the body, which reduces the potential for unwanted systemic effects. Basically, it's applied to the scalp, it works at the scalp, and by the time it gets absorbed deeper and circulates throughout the body, much of it has already been metabolized, so it's no longer active. Of course, there are plenty of men who are currently using Finasteride who don't experience any side effects, and that's great. But they also don't necessarily experience full prevention of hair loss, and those men are typically looking for something to boost their hair restoration strategy. This is why there is still a need for ongoing research into androgenic alopecia, which is the most common cause of age-associated hair loss. Going forward, the goal for researchers is to determine the most comprehensive strategy to reduce hair loss using a combination therapy approach. The majority of gradual hair loss experienced by both men and women is caused by DHT, which is a form of testosterone. DHT causes hair follicles to shrink, ultimately leading to the point that they can no longer support the growth of a strong hair shaft. In addition, hair follicles exist in a state of equilibrium between growth and rest. Normally, about 90% of your hair is in a growth phase called anagen, and about 10% is in a dormant phase, which lasts for about 4 months before new hair growth. However, if you're losing hair over time, those ratios are probably out of balance. So your hair shafts have become too weak and they're more prone to breaking. Fortunately, RU58841 is effective because it targets both those issues. It increases the diameter of individual hairs, which makes them more resilient, and it increases the proportion of hair in the anagen growth phase. Let's take a look at a couple of the preclinical studies of RU58841 to see just how it stacks up. Back in 1998, researchers at the University of Rochester in New York used a primate model of male pattern baldness to evaluate how RU58841 affects hair growth cycles. Before treatment, the average hair follicle length was measured to be less than 1 millimeter, and most of the follicles were in the telogen resting phase. However, after 5 months of topical treatment, the average hair follicle length increased by 25%, and the majority of hair follicles shifted into the anagen growth phase. 10 years later, in 2008, researchers in France evaluated RU58841 on human hair that was grafted from balding men. In this study, they chose to quantify the speed of hair growth and the thickness of individual hairs microscopically over 6 months of treatment. What they determined was that RU58841 significantly increased the speed of hair growth by 20% after 2 months, and the thickness of hair shafts increased by 200% after 6 months. Fortunately, for most men with only moderate hair loss, initial results can be seen visibly in as little as 3 months, especially if RU58841 is used in tandem with something else rather than on its own. It's important to remember that RU58841 works in a fundamentally different way than Finasteride because it blocks the activity of DHT, whereas Finasteride only slows the production of DHT. This difference in their mechanism of action also supports using both compounds simultaneously for maximum overall inhibition of DHT, attacking it from 2 different angles. Lastly, let's consider cost. RU58841 had a higher price point up until about 2014, but then the Royal Society of Chemistry published a new approach to chemical synthesis, which was much more efficient. And this technological advance lowered the price of the raw product, so topical solutions of RU58841 are now on par with topical Finasteride in terms of cost per bottle. Please remember that RU58841 is still investigational and more research is underway. For more information on the science of hair loss and hair restoration, head over to RegenRx.org and check out all of the science content. Thanks for watching.